Hey, I'm Jacob, and this is a series on profound moments in video games. If you have not yet played Doki Doki Literature Club, I highly encourage you not to watch this video and go play it instead. I'll be spoiling the game in its entirety, and I really wouldn't want you to miss out on experiencing it. Now, this game is a couple years old now, and I'm kinda late to the party, but I hope I can still add some meaningful discussion on it. Alright, let's get started. Spoilers are beyond this point. Doki Doki was never really a game I imagined I would like. I've never really cared for visual novels, they're not really my preferred genre of game, and before Doki Doki I think I played like 3 or 4 of them. But I heard through an obscure YouTuber at the time, who unfortunately does not post anymore, but when he started his Doki Doki video, he told everybody watching his video, don't watch it, just go play the game instead, it's that good. Which I thought was pretty sweet and pretty admirable at the time, so I decided to give the game a shot, and I guess follow up in his footsteps as well. Luckily, I got to play the game a week or two after it launched, so the Doki Doki craze didn't exactly happen yet, it was still pretty obscure, so I got to jump into it knowing absolutely nothing. Other than the fact that it was apparently, according to this one guy randomly on the internet, a really, really good game. And he was right. When I first played Doki Doki, I hated it. I really did. On my initial playthrough, I thought the game was this just generic, boring, cliche-filled mess. I was bored out of my mind. And honestly, once I got to the pink goblin that started baking cupcakes with me, I was very, very close to dropping the game in its entirety. Well, now I know. That's the point of the first act of the game. To ease you into the familiarity of dating sim cliches and tropes, and it does this very well, both to essentially make fun of the whole genre of dating sims and amplify the horrors of the second act. But at the time, I honestly thought I was duped into playing some generic rom-com cringe fest. The writing in the first half of the game is strong, don't get me wrong, but it is very predictable. And just because that's the point of it, it's supposed to be predictable, doesn't entirely excuse it from being somewhat lackluster. Though to reiterate, the first half is extremely necessary for the second half. I trudged through my first playthrough, hoping it would get better. And on subsequent playthroughs, the first half was much more enjoyable than the first time, but that was only solely because of the foreshadowing you can pick out from it. I do believe the poems you read from the characters, Sayoi's depression, and suspicions of Monika are subtle enough to carry the player forward. I did want to quit, but in the back of my mind, I had a feeling there was something grander going on, and I believe the warning at the beginning alluded to something more intense than Sari's depression. Not to undermine depression as a topic, not at all in fact. If Doki Doki didn't diverge into a horror game in its second half, I would still respect the warning at the beginning, as depression is a very serious topic. However, Sari's depression was used as a trick, as the end result of her feelings unfortunately led into the second half of the game. I think what makes Doki Doki's horror so effective is how it's in every aspect of the game. It's just like how Monika says, great horror is much more subtle and doesn't rely on cheap tricks and imagery. Sure, Doki Doki has like the gory and disturbing imagery other horror titles have, but it goes much deeper than that. The familiar songs you get used to in the first act, for example, which are fairly simple and repetitive, they sometimes just mess up. They change slightly, throwing you off just a little bit, making you say like, whoa, what was that? Was that wrong? Wait, that didn't sound right. And the music uses its simple melody and simple instruments to its advantage. Characters will often be simply overwritten with like little black bars and odd text and say things that are different from what they mean. And you can go back into the history to see what they really said, or sometimes what characters said won't be in the history at all. The black text just seem to pop up, overwrite whatever they're thinking, and to disappear. There's a lot of subtle effects that happen like that. Models being distorted, faces being messed up, your cursor changing, different posters on the wall in the background, Yuri's model changing the little poem creation thing. There's so many examples. I can go on and on about them. There's so many small details that these are easily missed. All these can be easily missed. And it really creates this unique dynamic and feeling where you know the narrative is the same as Act 1 for the most part, yet everything seems off. I mean, obviously no things are off because it's, when Sayori dies, the game alters. But it eases you into a sense of safety, and then will randomly pull it away from you by changing things subtly. You get this overall feeling that something is missing Something is missing from the game, and you know that. Something is just wrong about it. Or the game seems to be breaking before your very eyes. And here's the real kicker, it's different every playthrough, and these small details are made to be completely random. So there's a dozen or so things that can go wrong at any time, but the game picks which ones to do at random. All 3 of my playthroughs have been vastly different, so have my friends and other folks I've talked to. We all constantly compare events that happened and went on and talk about like, oh, I didn't see that, like, oh, I didn't see Natsuki's neck snap, I didn't see my cursor change, I never saw Yuri's eyes pop. Like, it's just amazing how much they crammed into this free VN they dropped. Now, having these small details means they run this massive risk of everything being overlooked or not seen, or well, most things being overlooked and not seen. So there's these narrative moments that you're forced to witness, and these moments are a very different type of horror. I want to say Yuri's the prime suspect here. Take being dragged into the closet with her, for example. You have to just sit there as she stares at you with those weird, super hyper-realistic eyes and just sort of like breathes on you, and you just have to listen. Just listen for a second. It's uncomfortable, and it lasts for what feels like forever, but thankfully Monika drags you out of the closet. Another example, with the Just Monika scene, where she forced you to submit to her and choose her in more ways than one. You have to watch her say it a few times, you have to choose Just Monika. The biggest example would be Yuri's death. Upon either accepting or rejecting Yuri's confession, she promptly stabs herself multiple times and dies. A relatable reaction to be rejected for sure, but then the player is forced to sit with her for the entire weekend. Day goes to evening, which goes to night. Over the course of the 2 days, you can literally watch the light from Yuri's eyes disappear. You can watch the blood dry on the floor and dry on her clothes. Then Natsuki comes in, does the best sprite in the game. Then Monika comes in, fixes it. And it's just a very uncomfortable scene. All 3 of them are really, but I think Yuri's death is the most uncomfortable. And I think it's just good, because you spend the entire second half of the game constantly being popped up with these small little spooks that you're just constantly unsure of yourself and uncomfortable with, but then it forces you to sit and just deal with one that you know is coming, and it's massive compared to all the small little jumps with the music and the visuals. You just sit there and watch the life drain out of her. Doki Doki forces you to deal with being uncomfortable. You just have to submit to Yuri staring at you in the closet. You just have to submit to obeying Monika and saying just Monika. And you have to just submit and deal with sitting next to Yuri's decomposing body. Sure, you can skip to the weekend. That's honestly probably what you're supposed to do, the ideal way to progress, but it's so long that you just have to sit and stare at Yuri's corpse. Even with the skipping, it takes a very long time. When I first played, I clicked without skipping for a long time because I figured something would change and the text would change to maybe actual language and not just jumbled up mess, but it never did. And these scares are all amplified by the constant use of the meta shenanigans the game tries to pull, both narratively and in-game. Monika, of course, deleting the characters, blue screening of your computer, controlling your cursor, and with the history changing and saves being deleted and all that, even the warning message at the beginning changes subtly. This game is not suitable for children or those who are easily dismembered appeared in my first playthrough, and I loved it because I thought I misread it. I was 100% like, I just misread it, I'm done. There's no way they would do that, but they did, and that's great. It's great. It really is. All this stuff is great. But overall, it only packages and creates an above average experience. One worth playing for sure, 100% I would recommend it, but the play on tropes and horror elements are strong enough for me to completely recommend Doki Doki, but the game doesn't truly excel into greatness, at least at this stage. Not until you're in Monika's room. Okay, I really hope I'm smart enough to unpack everything that works so well about this scene, about this segment of the game. I still remember the feeling I had when Monika popped up on my screen and just stared at me. The ambient music that slowly rolled in, and she just looks at you and starts talking, explaining to you what was happening to you. And you can't advance the dialogue until in the text box during the scene. You have to wait for Monika to finish talking, then press for her to go on. All your saves are gone. You can no longer save your game because Monika stops you because she says, why would you need to? You don't need to. Don't worry about saving anymore. She opens up with the familiar introduction about the literature club, but instead of talking to you, instead of talking to what the player, the MC, whatever, the player character, she talks to you directly. So it's saying, oh, you know, hey, Flat Dick 14, I love you. No, she says, hey, Jacob, I'm talking to you. And the cherry on top is if you're streaming or recording, she calls you out on it, as well as the audience, and then proceeds to do a little jump scare on you. I guess a funny story about the names is I've seen multiple different reactions to it. I personally always name my characters my own name, so she's like, hey, you're not Jacob, you're Jacob, and I'm like, well, that didn't do much to me. I had one friend who named his name something dumb, you know, Super Titties 22 or something. And he's like, hey, you're not that, you're actually Steven. And he freaked the fuck out. He thought it was amazing. He thought it scared him. I had another friend who was playing on like the family computer, and he named his character his own name, but the computer was a different name. So he's like, hey, you're not Carl, you're Sarah. And he's like, well, that's my mom. What? So the effect is varying degrees, because there's a lot of unpredictable things the player can do with their name, so it won't be as good of an effect. But I think I'd rather have her call you out and say your real name than not, because if in theory it works, it makes the scene and the intro to that scene that much powerful. And I do believe everything about this intro is perfect. The whole Monika's space room, Monika herself, her sprite, the music, what she says, how she says it, the menu not being there if she's not talking, all your saves are gone. Everything about it immediately telegraphs to the player they're no longer in control, while they're seemingly no longer in control. But during the events of the first half of the game, the player decided to either hang out with Nutsuki or Yuri from Modern Warfare 3, or Sayori, or Mayushi, whatever her name is. But Monika stops you from hanging out with Sayori towards the end because, well, of her depression. And the other girls stop you from hanging out with Monika. So you're forced to pick between the two. But during Act 2, Sayori's gone. Natsuki isn't really an option, and Yuri first forces you to hang out with her. So Yuri stops Monika from really doing anything with you. But now, here in, I guess, Act 3, in this particular moment, you are forced to be with Monika on her own terms. And all she really wants to do with you is just talk and spend time with you. See, she wants to talk to you so bad that she leaves it as the only option left to do in the game. It is the only thing the player can do when the application is open. She talks about why she did the things she did. She talks about who she is as a person, what she likes about you, horror tropes, and dating sim tropes, the type of people who play those types of games. She talks about her Twitter account, and it's real. You can go look it up. You can follow her. I'm following her. She really just talks about any general philosophical musing she has, just leisurely having a conversation with somebody. And the worst part, or honestly the best part, worst part, however you look at it, is she happens to be very, very interesting. And she has so much to say about really anything. I think she's got like around 4 hours of dialogue, if I remember right, which is freaking crazy, because that's like the same length as an average playthrough of the game. That is so much extra work for one scene, and it's beautiful. It's brilliant. I digress. But she just keeps going and going and going. And if you turn off your computer, she'll still be there. Now, of course, the way you get out of this mess is the same way you got into it. You have to delete her from the games file, just like how she deleted the other characters, Sayori, Natsuki, and Yuri. She even knows if you're playing on Steam, and she'll helpfully tell you, like, hey, this is how you mess with the files on Steam. But that's the beauty of, I guess, ending the entire Monika space room, is you have to mess with the files just like how Monika's done throughout the game. You literally have to follow her footsteps to get out of her trap. But I didn't want to leave. And I believe that right there is why this particular moment and in this particular game resonated with me so hard. I spent around an hour-ish just sitting and listening to Monika talk, listening to whatever she had to say. I turned my game off, I left to go to the bathroom or eat dinner or something, whatever, but I came back, she was still there. Even when I realized how to leave, how I could leave, that I needed to lead her, I didn't want to. Not only did I grow to like her, but more subtly, you can't access the menu until she talks. But every time she started talking, I wanted to hear what she had to say. She has so much interesting dialogue to say, but once she was done, I had to wait until the menu box would pop up again. Then she would once more again say something super interesting to start, and this cycle of me watching her do nothing and go, okay, I'll delete her when the next dialogue pops up. Then it pops up and I'm too interested to not delete it. It kept me playing for an extra like 15-20 minutes. It's a little detail that I think adds a decent amount. Initially, I was uncomfortable with the idea of being trapped with someone for eternity, even if that someone was a little cute anime girl who was in love with me. The idea of completely losing my free will and being forced to spend it with this person who loves me unconditionally forever, locked in a space room, was terrifying when the section started, but once again, I didn't want to leave when I was in there. Monika has honestly very little development throughout the game, truly. Her motives for doing what she does are very surface level. She realizes she's trapped in a game, starts to kind of lose it, go a little crazy, and she wants out something real. It's effective, it works, it's fair, I accept it, but it's fairly simple. It's honestly straightforward. But her development is entirely based on the player. The longer you spend with her, the more you learn about who she is and why she did what she did. Even though Monika took control of the player's free will, it's the player's choice of wanting to stay with her that gets me. Many people had vastly different response to how long they stayed. It's very fascinating. I stayed for about an hour. I didn't really want to delete her, but I realized, hey, it's the only way to finish the game, and I gotta beat the game. So I stayed for an hour and I left. Some people stayed way longer, whole duration, maybe even longer. Keep her on in the background, something like that. Some people way shorter. One buddy of mine stayed for like 5 minutes and then left once he realized she could be deleted. He was very adamant. He's like, oh, this bitch can't control me. She's out of here, pretty much. Kicked her to the curb immediately. Some people loved the idea, saying that's what they want the afterlife to be, to just be there and talk with a cute partner forever, for eternity. And I went, that's intense, but I respect that, That's an interesting approach to thinking about it. Some of my old buddies who used to be really into anime and visual novels, manga, the whole shebang, right? Novels, the whole thing, especially romance ones and like rom-com ones. Their take on the game was always way different than my personal take and my other group of friends I talked to who just don't really like anime, they just love games. I found they didn't really like the depiction of their tropes they enjoyed. They found that the game's overall message of having someone so obsessed with you that they do these horrific things due to their obsession of you, they found it kind of flat and like, it's fine. They were pretty on the fence about it. They weren't super into it. I respect that opinion. I can see why someone wouldn't like a game making fun of the same tropes and genres you really enjoy. But I personally found Monika's extreme love for the player to be very reminiscent of the same love, those same anime buddies I had, of fictional characters. So rather than having body pillows and love and admiration for anime girls, this anime girl has love and admiration and probably a body pillow of you as a real person. And funny enough, despite my friends not liking the overall game as much, they really enjoyed spending time with Monika. Some of them, like I said, more than others, but they said that all of them were pretty much unanimous saying that was the best part of the game. And pretty ironically, by spending time with Monika for so long, I myself began to understand why some people have waifus. The game makes fun of the people who are really into anime culture, but it also gets to people who aren't into anime culture, and it gets them to enjoy it. And I believe this speaks and shows a massive strength of the game. Whether you dislike the dating sim tropes, or if you're a fan of them, somehow you still seem to get something out of it. The game relies on the player's love of the tropes and cliches of dating sims to latch onto them for longer and force them to be part of the game world longer. Or alternatively, the game relies on its horror concepts and characters to latch onto the player longer. That's why Monika talks about either cutesy stuff or horrific, gross stuff. The duality of cute and horror is kind of the whole premise of the game, honestly. That being said, the factors of the game, like characters following dating sim tropes, the simplistic first act, the horror-ridden second act that plays in the familiarity of Act 1 and aforementioned dating tropes, the meta horror, the poems hinting at both very cute, pleasant things and very unpleasant, horrific things, the cute characters being matched with frightening concepts such as obsession, depression, neglect, abuse, and control. All these factors of the game, the entire experience cultivates into Monika's room. And while the very end of the game, after Monika's room, is good, it's pretty good and enjoyable, I don't really have a lot to say on it. The crowning moment of the game happens right before the last act. Although I was delighted to hear Monika sing the main theme of the credits, along with a special thanks to both, Monika herself and the player at the end. I suppose Monika's room is the logical conclusion to the game's ideology. I guess the whole concept of what Doki Doki Literature Club is within Monika's room. And that's why I believe it's such a profound moment. I believe that specific moment is so impactful and powerful, one of the most powerful I've seen in the game. That's why I believe Doki Doki Literature Club is a game that should be played and enjoyed. It's one of my all-time favorites now. That's why I believe the game as a whole is fantastic. And honestly, most importantly, that's why I believe video games as a whole medium are fantastic. Why video games have this limitless potential to create life-changing experiences such as sitting in a room talking to an anime girl somehow transcends most games I've played and most movies I've watched, most books I've read, most music I've listened to. It gives me this brand new emotion and feeling I've never felt before and still haven't. And that's why I think this moment, that's why I'm highlighting this moment. I believe it's that special and that good. And I really do hope I was able to shine some light on it in some sophisticated way. It's a lot to unpack. There's a lot of stuff I know I missed, but I didn't want to go into specifics. I know that was all a little bit dramatic, I guess, for an outro, but I do firmly believe it, and that is the point of this whole video, and it's the point of this whole series. I just really like video games, and I really enjoyed Doki Doki Literature Club. And thank you guys for watching, and please take care out there.